Medieval love was far messier and more complicated than most people realize. Forget the fairy tale weddings and happily ever afters. In the Middle Ages, love was tangled in rules, social status, family politics, and sometimes even danger. Knights composed poetry for women they might never meet. Noble families arranged marriages like business deals. Forbidden love could lead to scandal, or worse. Even peasants had to navigate gossip, traditions, and practical concerns, while the church dictated what was moral and acceptable. People expressed passion through secret letters, daring gestures, and quiet defiance, all while balancing the harsh realities of survival and duty. Love could inspire bravery, heartbreak, or tragedy, and often all three at once. Step into the castles, wander the forests, and listen to the whispers of hearts caught between desire and obligation. Medieval love was never simple, and that's exactly what made it so fascinating. The rules of courtly love. In the world of medieval Europe, love was not just a feeling, it was a carefully choreographed dance, governed by unspoken rules and a rigid code known as courtly love. This system, emerging in 11th and 12th century France, transformed romance into an art form, one that placed honor, devotion, and suffering at the center of desire. Love was no longer merely personal. It was moral, ceremonial, and above all, performative. At the heart of courtly love was the knightly ideal. A man did not simply declare his affection. He proved it through deeds of courage and loyalty. Knights undertook dangerous quests, fought in tournaments, and composed poetry or song, all to demonstrate their virtue and worthiness to a lady. The love itself was often unattainable, intentionally distant. A noblewoman might remain cold or indifferent, yet her approval and favor were the ultimate prize, validating the knight's honor and skill. Interestingly, courtly love often existed outside marriage. Marriages were typically arranged, driven by politics, wealth, and social alliances, leaving little room for passion or personal preference. Courtly love provided a socially acceptable outlet for desire, one that could be expressed through secret messages, poetry, or symbolic gestures, rather than physical consummation. A knight might dedicate a song to his lady, or compose a series of elaborate poems, each layered with coded messages, declarations of loyalty, and promises of future deeds. The rules of courtly love were strict but unwritten. First, love was secret. Public declarations were discouraged, and relationships had to remain discreet. Exposure could bring scandal, dishonor, or even punishment, particularly if the lady in question was married or of higher status. Second, love demands suffering. The idealized lover was expected to endure hardship, yearning, and frustration without complaint, believing that such trials refined both character and devotion. Third, the relationship emphasized spiritual and moral elevation. Love was an inspiration, a force that could lead men and women to higher virtue and nobility. The lady was often idealized as perfect, inspiring the knight to act with courage, honor, and generosity. Women's roles in courtly love were paradoxical. They were at once powerful and restricted. A lady could inspire great acts, control the trajectory of a romance, and even dictate the terms of a courtly exchange. Yet she remained constrained by societal expectations, bound by virtue, chastity, and decorum. Her approval was a form of power, but she could not simply choose a lover freely. Her influence existed within a tightly controlled social framework. The literature of the time immortalized these ideals. Troubadours in southern France sang of unattainable ladies, noble knights, and the agony of unfulfilled desire. These songs and poems spread across courts, reinforcing the rules of love and providing models for behavior. Even though these tales often stretched reality, they shaped expectations. Love required courage, discretion, and sometimes even self-denial. Despite the structure, courtly love was not merely a theatrical game. It had real consequences. A knight could rise in status or gain favor through his skill and reputation. Conversely, failure to uphold the ideals, be it cowardice, betrayal, or impropriety, could tarnish a reputation permanently. Love, in this sense, was inseparable from honor. A true lover had to be honorable, and an honorable man was expected to love nobly. Interestingly, this system applied across classes, though differently. Among peasants or lower nobility, elements of courtly love might appear in festivals, songs, and folk traditions. But social mobility, economic constraints, and survival often limited the elaborate rituals seen in aristocratic courts. Love remained complicated everywhere, though the stakes shifted depending on one's social position. Courtly love also created tension. The unattainable lady, the secret messages, and the heroic feats often conflicted with real-life obligations, such as arranged marriages or family duty. Many historical accounts tell of knights falling desperately in love with women they could never have, or of women torn between societal expectation and personal desire. This tension between duty and desire, between ideal and reality, defined much of medieval romance. In essence, courtly love was a paradox. It celebrated passion while restricting physical expression, elevated the individual while subordinating personal choice, and demanded both secrecy and public demonstration. It was a highly stylized form of love, a set of rituals and rules that made romance both enchanting and maddeningly complicated. By understanding these rules, we can see that medieval love was never simple. Every gesture, every poem, and every glance carried weight. Love was not merely an emotion, it was a performance, a moral exercise, and sometimes a dangerous game of honor and reputation. Arranged marriages and family politics. In medieval Europe, love and marriage were often strangers to one another. For most people, especially the nobility, marriage was never about personal desire. It was about strategy, alliances, and survival. Families, not individuals, arranged marriages, treating children almost like pieces on a chessboard, moved to secure political power, land, or wealth. The personal feelings of those involved were, at best, secondary, and at worst, completely irrelevant. For noble families, a marriage was an investment. Dowries, property, and political alliances were central to the decision. A wealthy landowner might betroth a daughter to a neighboring lord to secure borders or gain military support. Sons were similarly bound to unions that strengthened familial influence or consolidated estates. Love was considered a potential bonus, but not the goal. Indeed, in many cases, emotional attachment could be seen as a liability, a distraction from duty, or a source of scandal. Young nobles often had little say in these arrangements. Girls could be promised in marriage before reaching puberty, their futures decided by parents seeking advantage. Boys were similarly constrained, expected to honor family agreements even if it meant marrying someone they barely knew or someone they actively disliked. Refusing a match could lead to familial tension, loss of inheritance, or social ostracism. In short, medieval marriage was as much about politics as it was about partnership. The social hierarchy added layers of complexity. Marrying beneath one's station could bring disgrace, while marrying too far above might invite jealousy or resistance. Even within noble circles, the suitable match was dictated by subtle calculations of lineage, influence, and reputation. Families scrutinized bloodlines, alliances, and wealth, often negotiating marriage contracts with meticulous attention to detail. These contracts could be pages long, outlining not only dowries but the inheritance rights of future children, provisions for widows, and sometimes even rules about property disputes. Yet, even within these rigid structures, love occasionally found a way to bloom. Historical records show glimpses of affection, tenderness, and personal attachment developing over time, often quietly, after a marriage was arranged. In some cases, couples forged genuine partnerships, finding shared interests or mutual respect. But these were exceptions rather than the rule, and the pressure to conform to family expectations was relentless. The role of women in these arrangements was particularly constrained. While noble women might possess influence behind the scenes managing estates, cultivating alliances, or subtly swaying decisions. Their personal desires were often subordinate to their family's strategic goals. A young bride could move to a distant castle, marrying a man she barely knew, and her daily life would be dictated by duties to her husband, household, and in-laws. Love, if it existed, had to coexist with obligations that were socially enforced and legally binding. For men, the stakes were equally high. A poorly chosen alliance could weaken family influence, reduce wealth, or incite political conflict. A nobleman might feel torn between personal preference and the larger goals of his lineage. Courting someone outside the family's plans could be seen as rebellion, risking honor, reputation, and even livelihood. The tension between personal desire and familial duty was a constant source of internal conflict for many young nobles. In addition, arranged marriages often intersect with the rules of inheritance. Property and titles were tightly controlled, and a marriage could determine the fate of entire estates. Families had to consider succession, the legitimacy of heirs, and the preservation of wealth. This legal and economic backdrop made love seem almost irrelevant. The primary goal was stability and continuity, not romantic fulfillment. Despite these challenges, human desire could not be fully suppressed. Secret romances, discreet letters, and private encounters sometimes occurred, creating tension and, in some cases, scandal. Literature of the period, from troubadour poetry to courtly tales, often reflects this struggle. Characters navigating the gap between duty and passion, political necessity, and personal longing. These stories remind us that even in a society dominated by family strategy, the human heart found ways to rebel. Ultimately, arranged marriages in the Middle Ages reveal a world in which love was heavily mediated by social and political forces. They show us that marriage was more than a union of two people. It was a calculated tool, a form of diplomacy, and a safeguard for family legacy. Yet, amidst all the strategy and duty, the glimpses of personal attachment that did emerge remind us that love, even when constrained, was never entirely absent. Arranged marriages were rarely simple, and the consequences of choice, or lack thereof, shaped the lives of countless men and women. In this tangled web of duty, property, and politics, medieval love was often forced into secret corners, waiting to emerge in fleeting gestures, poetry, or quiet affection. The heart, as always, found ways to complicate even the most meticulously arranged union. Forbidden love and adultery. In medieval Europe, love was not only complicated, it could be dangerous. For many, the pursuit of desire outside the strict boundaries of social and religious rules carried serious consequences. Forbidden love, whether across class lines, within wedlock, or in defiance of church law, was a constant tension in medieval society. Adultery was not simply a personal failing. It was a breach of social order, honor, and morality. The church played a central role in defining what constituted acceptable relationships. Marriage was considered sacred, and vows were legally binding. To violate these vows was to commit a sin against God, with spiritual and sometimes legal repercussions. Men and women who engaged in illicit affairs risked penance, excommunication, or public humiliation. In some cases, noblemen and women could face fines, forced reconciliation, or the loss of property. The penalties were designed not merely to punish but to maintain social stability, ensuring that families' honor and alliances remained intact. Yet desire is rarely contained by rules, and countless stories from the period reveal the lengths to which people would go to pursue forbidden love. Secret meetings in forests, coded letters passed under the cover of darkness, and clandestine rendezvous in hidden chambers were common. These illicit romances often inspired literature and poetry, immortalizing the tension between societal expectation and personal longing. In troubadour songs and courtly tales, we see knights and ladies risking everything for the sake of love, elevating passion to an almost religious devotion, even as it defied social norms. Adultery carried a different weight depending on social status and gender. For men, affairs were often tolerated, especially if discretion was maintained, and sometimes even expected in cases where marriages were political arrangements rather than unions of affection. For women, however, the stakes were far higher. A noblewoman found guilty of adultery could face imprisonment, shaming, or even death in extreme cases. Her transgression threatened the legitimacy of heirs and the stability of family alliances. Even rumors of infidelity could destroy reputations and social standing. Class boundaries also complicated matters. Romantic relationships between nobles and those of lower status were particularly fraught. Such liaisons risked scandal and could destabilize political alliances. Even when mutual affection existed, societal pressure often forced lovers apart, leaving longing and heartbreak in their wake. These relationships, like the forbidden fruit they resembled, were both intoxicating and dangerous, fueling a cultural fascination with secret passion and clandestine encounters. Literature provides some of the most vivid glimpses into forbidden love. Tales of knights pursuing married ladies, secret romances between nobles and servants, and tragic love stories abound in medieval manuscripts. These stories often served as cautionary tales, illustrating the consequences of defying societal norms, while simultaneously celebrating the intensity of forbidden passion. The duality of punishment and romantic idealization reflects the complex ways medieval society understood love. It was morally fraught, politically charged, and emotionally compelling all at once. The human element cannot be ignored. Many people, particularly women, were trapped in marriages arranged for political or economic reasons. Forbidden love offered a glimpse of freedom, choice, and personal happiness, even if fleeting. Affairs, secret correspondence, and stolen moments became acts of rebellion, a way to assert agency in a world where personal desire was subordinated to duty. Yet the dangers were very real. Discovery could lead to imprisonment, social ostracism, or even death. Some affairs ended in tragedy, with lovers executed, families disgraced, or reputations permanently ruined. The stakes were high precisely because love threatened the carefully structured social order, making it a profoundly risky endeavor. Forbidden love in the Middle Ages illustrates a central truth. Love was never merely an emotion or a private affair. It was intertwined with honor, legality, and social structure. Every secret letter, every clandestine meeting, every stolen glance carried consequences that could reverberate across families and kingdoms. And yet, people continued to pursue it, driven by desire, longing, and the human need for connection. In the tension between duty and desire, forbidden love became a symbol of both passion and risk. It reminds us that in medieval times, love was not always celebrated. It was controlled, regulated, and punished. But even so, it remained one of the most compelling forces in human life, shaping stories, societies, and lives in ways that resonate to this day. Love and the Church. In medieval Europe, the Church was more than a spiritual authority. It was the ultimate regulator of morality, law, and human behavior. And when it came to love, the Church's influence was profound. From marriage to desire, the Church dictated what was acceptable, what was sinful, and what could even be imagined. Love, in the Middle Ages, was never purely personal. It was always intertwined with religion, morality, and social expectation. Marriage, for instance, was considered a sacred sacrament. Unlike today, where love is often the foundation, in the medieval period, marriage was first and foremost a religious institution. Consent mattered, but it was consent within a moral and legal framework approved by the Church. Marriages were blessed, recorded, and publicly recognized, binding couples not only socially, but spiritually. To break these vows was to commit a sin against God, a transgression with eternal consequences. The Church's influence extended to sexual conduct too. Sexual activity was morally acceptable only within marriage, ideally for the purpose of procreation. Desire for pleasure alone was frowned upon, and chastity was highly prized, especially for women, whose virtue was considered a reflection of family honor. Clergy, monks, and nuns were expected to live lives of celibacy, and the lives of saints were celebrated for their spiritual devotion, often equated with renunciation of worldly love. But human desire rarely followed moral prescriptions. Forbidden love and adultery were common, yet the Church wielded both spiritual and social tools to regulate them. Confession, penance, and public shaming were standard methods of enforcing moral behavior. Those caught in illicit affairs could be required to perform penance for years, often publicly, to atone for their sins. In some cases, more severe punishment awaited, particularly for women, whose chastity was tied not only to moral but social order. Interestingly, the Church also shaped the literature and ideals of love. The rise of courtly love coincided with clerical influence, paradoxically promoting a vision of romantic devotion that emphasized longing, secrecy, and moral refinement. Knights and poets elevated love into an almost spiritual exercise, idealizing women as sources of inspiration and virtue. In a sense, the Church's moral framework gave rise to the idea that love could be ennobling, a force that elevated the soul even when it remained unconsummated. Religious devotion itself often intersected with romantic ideals. Saints' lives, mystical writings, and hagiographies explored love not only between people, but between humans and God. Spiritual love was celebrated as the highest form of attachment, emphasizing purity, sacrifice, and devotion. This created a unique medieval tension. Earthly love could be dangerous or sinful, but it could also be a mirror of divine love, a pathway to moral and personal elevation if properly managed. The Church also controlled who could marry whom, reinforcing social hierarchies and maintaining order. Marriages across certain social classes or within prohibited degrees of kinship were forbidden. Love, no matter how passionate, could be declared invalid if it violated these rules. Annulments were rare, and marrying without church consent could lead to both spiritual condemnation and social ostracism. Yet, despite the Church's strictures, love persisted in secret corners, in whispered confessions, in letters and tokens exchanged under the veil of propriety. People found ways to navigate these restrictions, bending rules without outright breaking them. Romantic poetry often flourished precisely in these spaces, encoding desire within socially acceptable forms. Lovers learned to express longing while maintaining outward appearances of obedience and virtue. The Church's role in medieval love was paradoxical. On one hand, it imposed restrictions, punished transgressions, and defined morality. On the other hand, it inadvertently inspired ideals of courtly love, spiritual devotion, and romantic longing. Love was never simply a personal emotion. It was a moral, social, and spiritual negotiation, and navigating it required ingenuity, courage, and often secrecy. Understanding the Church's influence is key to understanding medieval love. Desire was always measured against morality. Passion was always framed by duty, and even forbidden romance existed within a world where spiritual approval and social acceptance could determine the stakes of every gesture. In the Middle Ages, love was never free. It was bound by faith, law, and society. Yet it remained one of the most compelling forces shaping human lives and stories. Love letters and poetry. In a world without texting, email, or even telephones, medieval lovers relied on creativity, secrecy, and words to express their desires. Poetry and letters were the lifeblood of romantic communication, a means of navigating strict social rules, and a way to keep love alive across distance, duty, and danger. For many, a carefully crafted message could speak more passionately than any private meeting ever could. The art of courtly love was inseparable from written expression. Knights, troubadours, and poets composed verses for noble women, embedding their admiration, longing, and devotion in elaborate language. These poems were more than entertainment, they were proof of virtue and courage. The act of writing or reciting poetry itself became a ritual, demonstrating patience, skill, and moral refinement. A knight's success in love was judged not only by deeds, but by the beauty and subtlety of his words. Love letters were often highly coded. Words, symbols, and even the choice of ink or paper could convey meaning hidden from the untrained eye. For instance, a message might refer to a shared memory, a favorite flower, or an allegorical tale known only to the recipient. These letters allowed lovers to communicate while maintaining discretion, protecting both their reputations and the fragile social order. Some letters survive today as exquisite examples of medieval courtship, full of longing, hope, and attention between desire and propriety. Women, too, were active participants in this literary exchange. Noble women often received letters, gifts, and poems, but many also wrote in return. A lady's response could guide a knight's actions, reward his devotion, or subtly rebuke impropriety. Their words carried power. A thoughtfully penned reply could enhance a man's reputation or leave him in anxious suspense. Far from passive, women were central to the art of courtly communication, shaping the rhythm and rules of romance through language. The content of these letters and poems ranged widely. Some were playful, teasing, or witty, demonstrating intelligence and charm. Others were solemn, filled with moral reflection, longing, or self-reproach. Often, the poetry emphasized unattainability, reinforcing the ideal that love should elevate character through patience and suffering. This distance, both emotional and physical, intensified passion, making every word a weapon, a plea, or a promise. Interestingly, love letters were not only romantic but sometimes political. A poem could reinforce alliances, subtly remind a noblewoman of a husband's devotion, or even mediate disputes between families. Language was power, and in a society where honor, reputation, and alliances were paramount, the written word became an instrument of influence. Lovers learned to navigate nuance, metaphor, and symbolism to convey emotions safely, balancing honesty with the strictures of morality and social expectation. Beyond the courts, among peasants and common folk, letters and poetry served similar purposes, though simpler and often infused with humor or folklore. Festivals, fairs, and communal gatherings provided opportunities for exchanging written notes, songs, or tokens. Even outside the elite, communication through words allowed people to express affection, maintain secrecy, and navigate the pressures of community and family. The enduring legacy of medieval love letters and poetry is a reminder that desire is often expressed through creativity. In a society constrained by rules, gender expectations, and social hierarchies, lovers found freedom in language. Words became a bridge across distance, a sanctuary for emotion, and a tool for negotiation between hearts, families, and society at large. Ultimately, medieval letters and poems reveal a fascinating paradox. Love was deeply constrained, yet human ingenuity allowed it to flourish. The written word provided a space where longing, passion, and personal choice could exist alongside duty, honor, and morality. It was a delicate dance of expression and discretion, a testament to the resilience of love in a world that demanded restraint. In every carefully chosen word, in every metaphor and hidden message, the human heart shines through. Medieval lovers may have lived under strict rules, but their letters and poetry show us that even within the most rigid structures, love finds ways to speak and to be remembered for centuries. Knightly valor and romantic proofs. In the Middle Ages, love was rarely passive. To win a lady's favor, a knight had to demonstrate his devotion not just through words, but through action, through courage, skill, and daring feats. This was the world of knightly valor, where romance and reputation were intertwined, and where love could only be proven through deeds worthy of admiration. The ideal of courtly love demanded that men earn affection. A knight could not simply declare his feelings. He had to embody them through heroism. Tournaments were a prime stage for such demonstrations. Knights jousted not only for prizes or honor, but to signal their worthiness to the women they admired. A victory in the lists was proof of strength, bravery, and moral superiority, a public declaration that a knight was worthy of love and respect. Every strike of the lance, every triumph in combat, was also a statement of devotion. Beyond tournaments, knights were often expected to undertake dangerous quests. These could range from rescuing captives to retrieving holy relics, or even confronting mythical challenges depicted in stories and romances. The risk itself amplified the romantic significance of the act. Courage under danger demonstrated not only skill, but loyalty and moral integrity. To a lady, a knight who risked life and limb in her name embodied the highest ideals of love and honor. The connection between heroism and romance extended into literature as well. Tales of knights like Lancelot, Tristan, and Percival often centered on proving worthiness through deeds. These stories blurred the line between reality and aspiration, inspiring real knights to follow a code in which bravery, loyalty, and refinement were inseparable from love. Literature codified what society expected, that true love required action, not idle sentiment. Romantic proofs were not limited to battlefield exploits. Knights demonstrated devotion through protection and service, guarding a lady's honor, defending her family, or negotiating on her behalf, were all considered noble acts of love. Even acts of generosity, such as gifting finely crafted items, commissioning poems, or organizing feasts in her honor, served to display both affection and status. Every gesture was measured, intentional, and publicly recognized, reflecting the belief that love must be earned and witnessed. Women, though often portrayed as passive recipients of such attention, wielded influence within this system. Their favor determined the value of a knight's deeds, and their judgment could elevate or diminish a man's social standing. In many cases, women used this power strategically, rewarding valor or discouraging inappropriate advances. The relationship between knight and lady was thus a complex negotiation of action, recognition, and mutual understanding. Yet this ideal often collided with reality. Knights might pursue unattainable women, undertake perilous tasks, or face rival suitors, and their efforts could end in disappointment or humiliation. Love inspired heroism, but it also carried risk. Failure could damage reputation, provoke ridicule, or even invite danger in a violent world where honor was paramount. The stakes of romantic action were high, and each demonstration of valor was as much a gamble as it was a declaration of devotion. Even among commoners, heroic acts carried romantic weight, though on a smaller scale. Young men might prove their bravery through hunting, labor, or local competitions, earning recognition from women and families alike. While these deeds lacked the grandeur of tournaments or epic quests, they reflected the same principle. Love demanded proof, and actions spoke louder than words. The emphasis on proof extended to symbolic gestures as well. Knights often left tokens of affection rings, embroidered cloths, or poems at the hands of their beloved, tangible reminders of devotion and courage. These items, carefully preserved, could serve as evidence of loyalty and inspire enduring admiration. A small token could carry the weight of a battlefield victory in the delicate dance of medieval romance. Ultimately, knightly valor demonstrates the medieval belief that love was active, performative, and inseparable from honor. To be a lover was to be brave. To be brave was to be worthy. Romance and reputation were entwined, and every action, from jousting in tournaments to gifting a token, was both a declaration of feeling and a statement of character. In the Middle Ages, love was not a private affair, it was a public performance. Through valor and deeds, knights showed that devotion was measurable, honor was essential, and affection was earned, often at great personal risk. The human heart, it seems, has always demanded proof, and in the medieval world, that proof was heroic. Women's influence and limitations. In the Middle Ages, women occupied a paradoxical position in society. On one hand, they were heavily constrained by social, legal, and moral expectations. On the other, they wielded subtle but undeniable influence, particularly when it came to love, marriage, and courtly politics. Understanding medieval romance requires seeing this duality. women as both limited by society and central to the expression of desire. For noble women, marriage was less a personal choice and more a strategic tool for families. Young girls were often betrothed to men chosen by parents to secure alliances, wealth, or land. Refusal was rarely an option, and obedience to family and social norms was expected. Yet within these boundaries, women found ways to exercise power. They could guide courtship through carefully measured gestures, letters, or approval. A nod of favor, a smile, or private conversation could inspire heroic deeds or influence a knight's actions. Even when constrained, women were not entirely passive. They could shape the very rules of courtly love. Women's influence extended beyond romance into politics and property. Noble women often managed estates while their husbands were away at war or attending court. They could administer lands, oversee finances, and mediate disputes, actions that strengthened their family's position and, indirectly, their personal standing. This managerial power gave them leverage in matters of marriage and courtship, allowing them to reward or withhold approval in ways that reinforced their social influence. Yet the limitations were real and often harsh. The church and society imposed strict rules regarding chastity, obedience, and moral conduct. A woman's virtue was tied to family honor, and her behavior was constantly scrutinized. Infidelity, even rumors of impropriety, could destroy a woman's reputation, endanger her family's social standing, or limit her prospects. Women were expected to inspire love, guide devotion, and maintain moral authority, all while remaining within narrow boundaries of acceptable behavior. The tension between influence and limitation shaped how women navigated love. In courtly settings, they became arbiters of desire, granting or withholding favor to control social dynamics. In arranged marriages, they might negotiate subtle forms of autonomy, carving out space for affection, personal expression, or alliances that served their interests. Their power was rarely overt, but it was strategic and effective, operating through nuance, subtlety, and the manipulation of social codes. Literature of the period reflects this duality. Women in medieval romances are often idealized as both inspiring and unattainable. They embody virtue, beauty, and moral authority, guiding the actions of men while remaining constrained by social expectations. These portrayals highlight the paradox. Women as central figures in love and courtly life, yet limited in freedom and choice. Their influence came not from breaking rules, but from mastering them. Even among commoners, women played active roles in love and courtship, though within different social constraints. Village life allowed for communal gatherings, dances, and festivals, where women could exercise choice in selecting partners. While economic and family pressures remained, women were often able to negotiate courtship more freely than their noble counterparts. Their influence may have been subtler, but it was no less significant in shaping relationships, social bonds, and communal norms. This paradox extended to the private sphere. Women could inspire poetry, prompt heroic deeds, and dictate social dynamics, all from positions of constraint. Their presence and judgment determined the success of romantic pursuits, and often the fate of estates and alliances. Yet the costs of stepping outside social expectations were severe. The balance between agency and limitation defined much of the medieval female experience, and it deeply influenced the nature of love itself. Understanding women's role in medieval romance reveals why love was so complicated. It was not merely a matter of feeling, it was a negotiation of power, status, and propriety. Women, though constrained, were essential to the orchestration of desire, guiding the hearts of men while navigating a world that restricted their freedom. Love, therefore, was a delicate dance, shaped as much by social rules and strategic influence as by passion or personal choice. In essence, medieval women were both the muses and the arbiters of love. Their influence was pervasive, their limitations tangible, and their role in the romantic landscape was pivotal. Without recognizing this duality, one cannot fully grasp the complexity of medieval love, a system where desire, duty, and power intersected. and where the human heart, especially the heart of a woman, navigated a maze of both opportunity and constraint. Peasant romance. While the nobles of medieval Europe engaged in courtly love, knights' quests, and arranged marriages, life for peasants and their love lives was a very different story. The daily reality of survival, labor, and community obligations shaped how ordinary people experienced romance. Yet despite these constraints, peasant love was rich, vibrant, and often surprisingly clever. In villages and small towns, social bonds were strong, and everyone knew everyone else's business. This made public displays of affection tricky. Gossip could spread quickly, and missteps in courtship could damage reputations. But peasants had their own ways of navigating these pressures. Festivals, fairs, and religious holidays became key opportunities for courtship. Dancing, singing, and communal games allowed young men and women to meet, flirt, and gauge mutual interest, often under the watchful eyes of neighbors or family. Courtship among peasants was more egalitarian than in noble circles, though social hierarchy still played a role. Families often had a say in potential matches, particularly when economic or labor considerations were at stake. Marrying someone who could contribute to the household or support the family's work was practical, not merely romantic. But within those boundaries, personal preference mattered more than it did among the nobility. Young couples learned to negotiate family approval, personal affection, and social expectations, creating a delicate balance between desire and duty. Written communication was less formal than among the upper classes, but letters, tokens, and simple poetry still played a role. Lovers might exchange small gifts, handmade ribbons, carved wooden trinkets, or simple notes hidden in a pocket or under a window. Songs, recited during work or at communal gatherings, also became a medium for expressing feelings. Humor, wit, and cleverness were valued. A peasant's ability to craft a playful poem or perform a charming gesture could earn admiration and affection. Secret meetings were another hallmark of peasant romance. Young couples often met at dusk by the river, in barns, or in secluded woodland areas. These clandestine encounters provided space for intimacy away from the scrutiny of family or community. Unlike noble lovers, whose secrecy was often about honor or social etiquette, peasant secrecy was frequently practical, avoiding parental interference or safeguarding future prospects. Yet, even these simple acts of rebellion carried risk. Discovery could lead to punishment, embarrassment, or intervention by parents, who sometimes enforced marriages or arranged matches based on economic considerations. Religious practices also shaped peasant love. Church attendance was central to community life, and saints' feast days or processions offered both spiritual and social opportunities for young people to interact. Love and faith were intertwined, as couples sought blessings for their unions and navigated moral expectations. While priests might preach chastity and adherence to social norms, they often tolerated courtship rituals that fell within the bounds of morality, allowing love to flourish within structured limits. Despite these constraints, peasant love was deeply human, full of humor, longing, and clever strategy. Courtship songs, playful teasing, and creative gestures reveal a culture that valued ingenuity as much as virtue. Peasants may not have had the wealth, status, or elaborate ceremonies of the nobility, but their emotional lives were no less complex. Desire, devotion, and heartbreak existed alongside the harsh realities of work, survival, and social expectation. The stakes of peasant romance were different, but no less significant. A marriage could determine survival, family stability, and social standing within the village. Love was intertwined with practical concerns: cooperation in labor, the continuation of family lines, and the sharing of resources. Yet, even in this pragmatic context, romance had room for play, creativity, and genuine feeling. Ultimately, peasant romance shows that love in the Middle Ages was not only a matter of courts and castles. Across social classes, from nobles to laborers, people found ways to express affection, assert desire, and navigate the pressures of duty and expectation. Among peasants, love was grounded in daily life, yet it was imaginative, strategic, and heartfelt, a reminder that even in constrained circumstances, the human heart finds ways to reach out, connect, and seek joy. In a world dominated by survival, obligation, and social scrutiny, peasant love was both pragmatic and passionate. It was simple yet clever, modest yet meaningful, a testament to the universality of desire and the ingenuity of ordinary people. Medieval love, it seems, was complicated at every level. From the grand halls of castles to the humble cottages of the countryside, secret meetings and codes. In medieval Europe, love was rarely simple, and secrecy was often essential. Social hierarchies, family obligations, and the watchful eye of the church made open expressions of desire risky, especially in cases of forbidden or courtly love. To navigate these constraints, lovers developed ingenious ways to communicate and meet. Secret codes, hidden messages, and clandestine rendezvous became the currency of romance. Among the nobility, secret meetings were as much a part of courtly love as poetry or heroic deeds. Knights and ladies often arranged private encounters in gardens, forests, or secluded chambers where they could exchange words, gifts, and gestures away from prying eyes. These meetings were fraught with danger. Discovery could result in scandal, punishment, or a tarnished reputation, particularly for women. Yet, the thrill of secrecy heightened the emotional intensity, making every glance, every touch, and every word feel more profound. Letters and tokens were critical to this clandestine communication. Lovers exchanged handwritten notes, often written in metaphor or allegory, to conceal meaning from the uninitiated. A simple phrase might carry multiple layers of significance, understood only by the recipient. Gifts, embroidered handkerchiefs, carved wooden trinkets, or rings acted as tangible proof of affection, often encoded with symbolism that conveyed secret messages. Even the placement of a letter could be part of a carefully choreographed system, slipped beneath a door or tucked into a garden nook for retrieval. Symbolism extended beyond objects and words. Colors, flowers, and gestures were imbued with meaning. A particular flower left on a windowsill could express longing. A handkerchief placed on a knight's sword could signify fidelity, or a specific tune played on a lute could communicate an unspoken promise. Lovers became adept at interpreting and creating these subtle signals, transforming everyday objects and actions into a private language of devotion. Codes were also linguistic. Poets and troubadours often wrote in elaborate rhyme schemes or allegorical forms that disguised the true intent of their messages. A poem might recount the deeds of a knight or the virtues of a lady, but hidden within the verses were personal declarations of love, advice, or even warnings. These literary codes allowed lovers to maintain discretion while still expressing passion, reinforcing the ideal that love required ingenuity and restraint. Secret meetings and coded communication were not limited to the nobility. Among peasants, lovers used barns, riverbanks, forests, and village festivals as venues for clandestine encounters. Notes were passed secretly, songs carried hidden meanings, and playful gestures served as signals to indicate interest or arrange meetings. While the scale was smaller and the means less formal, the underlying principles were the same. Secrecy, symbolism, and ingenuity allowed love to flourish despite social constraints. Even within arranged marriages, secrecy sometimes played a role. Couples who found mutual affection might communicate in subtle ways to express desire, maintain intimacy, or negotiate personal boundaries. In a society where duty often overshadowed personal choice, secret codes and meetings provided a rare space for agency, connection, and emotional expression. These clandestine practices also reinforced the ideals of courtly love, where longing and patience were prized. The very act of waiting, deciphering codes, or risking discovery became part of the emotional and moral journey of love. Desire was not merely expressed, it was tested, refined, and elevated through the challenges of secrecy. This tension between risk and reward, between concealment and expression, is what made medieval love so compelling and often so perilous. Ultimately, secret meetings and coded messages reveal the creativity, daring, and resilience of medieval lovers. Love was not merely a private feeling, it was a skill, a strategy, and sometimes a subtle rebellion against social expectations. Every hidden letter, every symbolic token, every clandestine rendezvous carried profound significance, showing that even in a world constrained by duty, hierarchy, and morality, the human heart will find ways to speak. Medieval love, therefore, was a game of ingenuity as much as desire, a delicate dance of secrecy and expression where every action mattered, and every signal could change the course of a life, a marriage, or a legend. In the shadows of castles, in quiet village corners, and amidst the scrutiny of society, lovers created their own language, proving that even in the Middle Ages, love found ways to be daring, creative, and unforgettable. Love and honor. In medieval Europe, love was never purely emotional. It was bound up with honor, reputation, and social standing. To love, or to be loved, carried responsibilities, expectations, and consequences that went far beyond the private sphere. The interplay between affection and honor shaped nearly every romantic relationship, making love a high-stakes game where morality, courage, and reputation were constantly tested. For knights and nobles, honor was inseparable from love. A man could not simply profess affection. He had to prove his worthiness through deeds, loyalty, and moral integrity. To act dishonorably in pursuit of love by deceiving, harming, or publicly shaming a lady was to risk reputation, social standing, and sometimes life itself. Courtly love codified this connection. Desire was noble only if it was pursued with virtue, patience, and discretion. Every act of devotion was simultaneously a test of character and a public statement of morality. Women, too, were judged according to standards of honor. A lady's virtue was central to her family's reputation, and her behavior was closely scrutinized by peers and society. Being overly forward, secretive in ways that were socially unacceptable, or engaging in illicit affairs could tarnish not only her own honor, but that of her family. Conversely, a woman who acted with discernment, grace, and moral integrity could elevate the standing of both herself and her loved ones. In this sense, love was never private. It was a performance of virtue that reflected on everyone involved. The stakes of love and honor were particularly high in arranged marriages. While personal desire was often secondary, maintaining dignity, loyalty, and propriety remained crucial. Husbands and wives navigated complex social expectations, ensuring that their actions, whether public or private, did not compromise family standing. Even small lapses in decorum could invite gossip, humiliation, or social consequences. Love, therefore, required careful balancing of affection, respect, and social responsibility. Forbidden love amplified these pressures. When desire collided with duty, the risks were profound. Secret romances could lead to scandal, exile, or even execution. Yet, for many, the pursuit of love, even illicit love, was framed as an honorable challenge. Knights might undertake dangerous quests to prove devotion to an unattainable lady, while women might exercise careful discretion, granting favor without compromising virtue. In these scenarios, love became a test of moral courage as much as emotional commitment. Literature from the period reflects this tension. Tales of knights, ladies, and forbidden romances often center on questions of integrity, loyalty, and social consequence. Heroes were celebrated not only for their bravery or passion, but for their ability to navigate the moral and social rules surrounding love. Villains were often those who acted selfishly, dishonorably, or recklessly in pursuit of desire. Stories reinforce the idea that love without honor was empty and often dangerous. Even among peasants, love and honor were intertwined, though the scale and stakes differed. Reputation within the village mattered. Acts of dishonesty, betrayal, or public impropriety could have real consequences. Courtship rituals, playful teasing, and clandestine meetings were conducted with an eye toward maintaining dignity and social respect. Honor, in this context, was practical as well as moral, influencing future prospects, community acceptance, and family standing. The intertwining of love and honor created a culture in which desire was never straightforward. Every glance, gesture, and word carried weight. Every poem, letter, or heroic deed was measured not only for emotional sincerity, but for its reflection on character. Love demanded courage, intelligence, and self-control. It was a moral and social exercise as much as an emotional one, with consequences that could ripple across families, communities, and even kingdoms. Ultimately, understanding the connection between love and honor is key to understanding medieval romance. Love was never merely personal. It was public, ethical, and strategic. It required negotiation between desire and duty, emotion and reputation. In this intricate dance, those who succeeded were often those who combined courage, discretion, and moral integrity. Medieval love was complicated not only by social and religious rules, but by the constant tension between what the heart desired and what honor demanded. In this world, to love well was to act nobly, and to act nobly was to love wisely, a delicate balance that defined the emotional landscape of an entire era. Festivals, dancing, and social gatherings. For most people in medieval Europe, love was not confined to private letters, secret meetings, or courtly poetry. It thrived in the public spaces of festivals, fairs, and social gatherings, where music, dance, and ritual created opportunities for romance. These communal events allowed men and women to meet, flirt, and express desire within socially acceptable boundaries, creating a vibrant and dynamic arena for medieval courtship. Festivals were tied closely to the agricultural and religious calendar. Saints' feast days, harvest celebrations, and local fairs provided structured occasions for social interaction. In rural communities, work dominated daily life, leaving little time for leisure. Festivals broke the monotony, offering moments of joy, entertainment, and, importantly, connection. Young men and women could meet potential partners, exchange glances, and test compatibility through song, dance, and playful competition. These interactions were carefully observed, balancing personal freedom with community oversight. Dancing played a central role in medieval courtship. From simple folk dances in village squares to elaborate courtly dances in castles, movement was a means of communication. A partner's skill, attentiveness, and confidence conveyed social competence, grace, and interest. Dance could be flirtatious, formal, or competitive, providing a public yet controlled space for romantic signaling. For nobles, dancing was also a way to display refinement and status, blending social etiquette with personal charm. Even among peasants, dance allowed subtle expression of desire and creativity, often accompanied by song or playful teasing. Games and competitions further enriched these gatherings. Archery contests, wrestling matches, and mock tournaments offered young men a chance to display physical prowess, courage, and skill qualities that could attract attention from women. Similarly, playful challenges or witty verbal contests allowed women to demonstrate intelligence, agility, and charm. These shared activities created mutual recognition and admiration, reinforcing the idea that love involved both personal merit and social display. Music was another essential medium for romance. Minstrels, troubadours, and local musicians performed songs of love, longing, and heroic deeds. These performances were not only entertainment, but a vehicle for courtship. A clever or emotive song could express feelings that were otherwise impossible to communicate openly. Lovers might dedicate a tune, compose verses on the spot, or use lyrics to convey hidden meanings, deepening emotional connection while adhering to social norms. Religious observances often intersected with social interaction. Pilgrimages, church festivals, and processions offered structured opportunities for young people to meet and form bonds. The church sanctioned certain gatherings while monitoring conduct, creating a balance between freedom and oversight. Participation in these events demonstrated piety, virtue, and social responsibility qualities valued in a prospective partner. This intersection of faith and festivity highlights the way medieval life intertwined spiritual, social, and romantic concerns. Even in structured social environments, there were opportunities for subtle rebellion. Lovers could exchange glances, whispered words, or small tokens in ways that skirted parental oversight. Playful teasing, strategic proximity, or participation in shared tasks during festivals allowed couples to gauge interest, build rapport, and maintain discretion. These small acts of ingenuity were crucial for navigating the tension between desire and societal expectation. Festivals and social gatherings also helped to reinforce social cohesion. Courtship occurred within the visible framework of the community, ensuring that relationships adhered to moral, economic, and political norms. By integrating romance into collective activities, society maintained order while permitting personal connection. The balance of freedom and oversight allowed love to flourish without threatening the broader social structure. Ultimately, festivals, dancing, and gatherings reveal that medieval love was public, performative, and socially mediated. Romance was experienced through interaction, observation, and shared cultural practices. Whether through movement, music, or playful contests, people found ways to express affection, desire, and compatibility while respecting community expectations. These communal rituals made love a lived experience, one that was visible, celebrated, and negotiated within the structures of society. Medieval love was therefore not only a private emotion but a communal performance. Festivals, dances, and gatherings offered a stage on which desire could be expressed, talent displayed, and connections forged. Within these vibrant social arenas, love was both celebrated and controlled, a delicate interplay of freedom, creativity, and obligation that shaped hearts and lives across the medieval world. Marriage ceremonies and rituals. In medieval Europe, marriage was far more than a personal commitment. It was a public, religious, and social institution. Ceremonies and rituals surrounding marriage reflected the values of society, the influence of the church, and the strategic considerations of families. For both nobles and commoners, weddings were elaborate affairs that combined faith, festivity, and social negotiation, with each gesture loaded with meaning. For nobles, marriage ceremonies were meticulously planned events. They served multiple purposes: formalizing alliances, showcasing wealth and status, and publicly validating the union. The ceremony itself often involved elaborate processions, feasting, and pageantry, designed to impress witnesses and reinforce the social hierarchy. Clothing, jewelry, and heraldry were carefully chosen to signal family wealth, rank, and influence. Every detail, from the seating arrangements to the music, was symbolic, emphasizing honor, lineage, and the continuity of social order. The church's role was central. Marriage was a sacrament, blessed by clergy, and recognized by God. The ceremony included vows, prayers, and blessings, emphasizing the spiritual significance of the union. Consent was required from both parties, though in practice, personal preference was often secondary to family negotiation. The exchange of rings or tokens symbolized the binding of hearts and the public acknowledgement of commitment, reinforcing the sacred and legal dimensions of the marriage. Among commoners, weddings were simpler but no less meaningful. Village ceremonies combined religious ritual with community celebration. The parish priest officiated, and neighbors gathered to witness the union. Feasting, music, and dancing were essential components, creating opportunities for communal joy and social bonding. Though lacking the grandeur of noble ceremonies, these celebrations reflected the importance of marriage as a foundation of family, labor, and local society. Rituals surrounding marriage extended beyond the ceremony itself. Pre-wedding customs, such as betrothal contracts, dowries, and negotiation of property rights, established the economic and legal framework of the union. Dowries, in particular, were a critical element. They could include land, livestock, or money, serving as both an investment and a safeguard for the wife in case of widowhood. For families, the dowry ensured the stability of the household and reinforced social and economic alliances. Post-ceremony traditions also reinforced societal expectations. The first night together, the presentation of the bride to the groom's household, and communal festivities all signaled the integration of the couple into broader family and community networks. In some regions, symbolic acts, such as sharing bread, wine, or ceremonial gestures, highlighted unity, cooperation, and the merging of families. These rituals were not merely performative. They reflected the values, responsibilities, and expectations attached to marriage. Despite the social and religious significance, love was not absent from marriage. For some couples, affection and companionship developed over time, growing within the structured framework of the union. In certain cases, mutual respect and understanding became the foundation for genuine emotional connection, even in marriages arranged for strategic reasons. Love, though often secondary at the outset, could flourish within the rituals and shared responsibilities of married life. However, the pressures of marriage could also create tension. Conflicting expectations, social obligations, and economic concerns sometimes led to strife, infidelity, or emotional dissatisfaction. Women in particular faced restrictions, managing households, children, and social responsibilities, while navigating limited autonomy. Men were expected to uphold honor, protect family interests, and maintain status. The interplay between personal feelings and societal expectations made marriage a complex negotiation of duty, desire, and reputation. Medieval marriage ceremonies and rituals illustrate that love was deeply entwined with social, religious, and economic frameworks. Every gesture, vow, and celebration had meaning, reflecting both the values of the individual and the broader expectations of society. Marriage was public, performative, and highly structured, yet it also provided space for connection, partnership, and the slow cultivation of affection. Ultimately, these ceremonies were more than tradition, they were a mirror of medieval life itself. They captured the balance between duty and desire, between public expectation and private emotion, offering a lens into how love, honor, and society were inseparably linked. In every vow and ritual, medieval couples navigated the intricate dance of human hearts constrained by custom, yet capable of passion and devotion. Widows, remarriage, and second chances. In medieval Europe, death was an ever-present reality, and the loss of a spouse could drastically reshape love, family, and social dynamics. Widows and widowers faced not only emotional grief, but also practical and social challenges. Marriage, property, and honor were all affected by the death of a partner, making remarriage a complex but sometimes necessary aspect of medieval life. For widows, the situation was particularly delicate. Women often depended on their husbands for financial stability and social standing. The death of a husband could leave a woman vulnerable, especially if she had young children or limited inheritance rights. Widows could retain some autonomy if their dowry or jointure, a portion of property set aside for their use, was sufficient. But economic and social pressures frequently pushed them toward remarriage. Families, recognizing both the practical and strategic value of a widow, might encourage or arrange a second marriage to secure alliances, manage estates, or ensure the care of children. Remarriage was socially acceptable, but it was often carefully regulated. The church required consent and sometimes imposed waiting periods, ensuring that marriages were conducted within moral and legal frameworks. Widows and widowers were expected to navigate social expectations with discretion, balancing grief, duty, and the needs of the household. In practice, a widow's decision to remarry could be influenced by personal desire, family strategy, or economic necessity, creating a complex web of motives and consequences. For men, remarriage was usually less socially complicated, though it carried strategic importance. A widower might remarry to secure heirs, consolidate property, or strengthen alliances. Unlike women, men's social status and financial stability were rarely compromised by widowhood, giving them greater freedom to choose a spouse. Yet remarriage also demanded careful negotiation, particularly when children from a previous marriage were involved, or when inheritance and property rights could be affected. Love and remarriage were intertwined in interesting ways. Some widows and widowers found genuine affection in subsequent marriages, particularly when mutual respect and companionship were prioritized. In a society where marriages were often arranged, a second marriage could provide an opportunity for emotional fulfillment, albeit within the confines of social expectations. Literature from the period occasionally explores themes of second-chance love, highlighting both the challenges and possibilities of building intimacy after loss. The presence of children added another layer of complexity. Blended families required careful management of property, inheritance, and household roles. Stepparents and stepchildren navigated delicate social dynamics, balancing loyalty to the deceased with the needs of the present. Romance, affection, and family cohesion had to be negotiated alongside practical concerns, creating situations that were emotionally rich yet fraught with tension. Widowhood and remarriage also intersected with issues of morality and public perception. Women who remarried quickly could face gossip or criticism, while men who delayed remarriage risked neglecting family interests. The timing, choice of spouse, and manner of remarriage were closely scrutinized, emphasizing that even personal decisions about love were subject to social and moral judgment. Among commoners, remarriage was often driven by practical necessity. Labor, household management, and survival created strong incentives to remarry. Emotional factors were still present, but they were frequently intertwined with the realities of work, sustenance, and family responsibility. A second marriage could provide companionship, shared labor, and security, demonstrating that love, even if pragmatic, remained an essential human pursuit. Ultimately, widowhood and remarriage reveal the resilience of medieval love. Despite social constraints, personal loss, and the pressures of duty, people sought connection, affection, and partnership. The capacity to love again, to forge new bonds, and to navigate complex social dynamics illustrates the adaptability and endurance of the human heart. In a world where life was fragile and social expectations rigid, widows and widowers faced both challenges and opportunities. Their experiences highlight the interplay between grief, duty, and desire, showing that medieval love was never simple, never static, and always shaped by the realities of survival, honor, and social connection. Courtly intrigue and rivalries. In medieval courts, love rarely existed in isolation. Courtly life was a theater of power, politics, and social maneuvering, and romantic relationships were often entangled with intrigue, rivalry, and strategic calculation. Desire could elevate or destroy reputations, spark alliances or feuds, and turn affection into a dangerous game where one misstep could have lasting consequences. Noble courts were arenas of constant observation. Every interaction between men and women was scrutinized, interpreted, and sometimes manipulated. A lady's favor was a symbol of status, while a knight's devotion was both a personal and public performance. Rival suitors, jealous peers, and ambitious courtiers all watched closely, ready to exploit perceived weaknesses or slights. Love, in this context, was inseparable from social dynamics. A romance could advance one's position or precipitate scandal. Courtly love often encouraged secrecy, but secrecy alone did not protect lovers from rivalry. Knights competed for the attention of noblewomen, displaying bravery, eloquence, and creativity in hopes of earning favor. Poetry, song, and symbolic gestures became tools of competition as much as expressions of desire. The success of one suitor could provoke resentment, sabotage, or cunning schemes by another, turning romance into a contest of wit, skill, and social leverage. Women too navigated these complexities strategically. A lady's favor could influence the social standing of a knight, and her judgment was often keenly aware of rivalries. Women used discretion, charm, and subtle signaling to reward loyalty or discourage unwanted attention. In some cases, they acted as mediators, guiding courtly rivalries in ways that reinforced their own authority and protected their reputations. The ability to manage desire without compromising virtue was a hallmark of aristocratic influence. Intrigue extended beyond personal rivalry to broader political stakes. Marriage alliances were tools of diplomacy, and romantic attachments could affect the balance of power between families or even kingdoms. A union could secure land, forge military alliances, or consolidate influence, while a public scandal could threaten both personal honor and political stability. Love, in the courtly context, was therefore inseparable from strategy, requiring careful negotiation of desire, loyalty, and social consequence. Literature from the medieval period captures this tension vividly. Tales of knights competing for unattainable ladies, lovers plotting secret meetings, and rivals scheming behind closed doors illustrate the high stakes of courtly romance. These stories were more than entertainment. They reflected the lived experience of courts where affection, ambition, and danger were intertwined. Success in love required not only courage and devotion, but intelligence, timing, and social acumen. Even outside the noble courts, rivalry shaped romantic relationships. Among emerging urban elites or affluent merchants, competition for advantageous marriages mirrored the stakes of aristocratic society, though on a smaller scale. Reputation, economic considerations, and family alliances all influenced the dynamics of desire, making love a carefully managed social endeavor rather than a purely personal affair. The tension between love and rivalry also created opportunities for creativity and ingenuity. Knights might compose elaborate poems, undertake daring quests, or perform acts of service to distinguish themselves from competitors. Women, aware of these rivalries, could subtly manipulate attention, test devotion, or reward merit in ways that reinforce their social position. Courtly intrigue, therefore, was not only a challenge, but a canvas for skill, strategy, and subtle artistry in the pursuit of love. Ultimately, courtly intrigue and rivalry illustrate why medieval love was so complicated. Affection existed alongside ambition, desire was interwoven with duty, and the pursuit of the heart required careful attention to social, political, and moral contexts. Love was never private. It was a public negotiation, a test of character, and a dance of strategy and emotion. In the medieval world, to love well was to navigate the currents of rivalry, reputation, and intrigue. Every glance, gesture, and declaration carried weight, influencing not only personal relationships, but social standing and political outcomes. Romance in the court was as perilous as it was passionate, a high-stakes game where hearts, honor, and power were inextricably linked. Forbidden desires and consequences. Medieval love was rarely straightforward, and sometimes desire crossed the boundaries of law, morality, and social expectation. Forbidden love, whether an affair, a romance across social classes, or an illicit attraction to a married person, carried immense risk. Yet it also fueled passion, intrigue, and human creativity, revealing the complexities of emotion in a world tightly controlled by church, family, and social hierarchy. Adultery was among the most dangerous forms of forbidden love. Women, in particular, were scrutinized heavily, with their chastity tied to family honor and social stability. Men might face consequences, but women bore the brunt of shame, punishment, and social exclusion. Punishments ranged from public humiliation to fines, exile, or even corporal punishment in extreme cases. Forbidden desires, therefore, were not only morally condemned, but legally enforced, making secrecy essential for survival. Romances across social classes were also fraught with peril. A nobleman's affection for a commoner or a peasant's attraction to someone of higher rank could threaten the social order. Such relationships were often clandestine, conducted through secret letters, hidden meetings, or intermediaries. If discovered, they could result in family intervention, annulled unions, or even violent reprisal. Yet the allure of crossing boundaries, of defying rigid hierarchies, made these forbidden connections compelling and memorable. Clerical prohibitions further complicated love. The church controlled marriage, inheritance, and sexual morality, declaring certain relationships sinful or illegal. Lovers found themselves constrained not only by law but by spiritual authority, where sin carried eternal consequences. Forbidden desire was thus both a social and moral gamble. Confession, penance, and public scrutiny shaped the stakes, emphasizing the tension between personal longing and moral obligation. The psychological and emotional effects of forbidden love were profound. Secrecy, longing, and risk heightened emotional intensity. Lovers experienced exhilaration and fear, passion and guilt simultaneously. Literature and poetry from the period reflect these tensions, portraying illicit relationships with drama, moral reflection, and often tragic consequences. From courtly romances to folk tales, forbidden love served as both cautionary tale and celebration of human desire. Even seemingly minor transgressions could carry consequences. A glance, a touch, or a playful gesture could be misinterpreted or reported, leading to scandal or punishment. The fine line between acceptable courtship and forbidden desire made love a high-stakes endeavor, where careful attention to social cues and moral codes was essential. Mistakes could affect not only individuals but families and communities, demonstrating that medieval love was never merely personal, it was public, performative, and consequential. Yet forbidden desires also inspired creativity and resilience. Lovers invented secret codes, messages, and signals to navigate restrictions. Poetry, song, and gifts became tools to express passion without exposure. The ingenuity required to maintain these clandestine relationships is a testament to the lengths to which people went to pursue connection in a constrained world. In this sense, forbidden love was as much about strategy and wit as it was about emotion. In some cases, the consequences were tragic. Scandals could lead to social exile, annulment, or violence. Lovers might be separated permanently, reputations destroyed, and family honor tarnished. The moral and social cost of desire was real, yet human passion remained resilient, finding expression wherever discretion, creativity, and courage allowed. Ultimately, forbidden love illustrates the tension at the heart of medieval romance. Desire existed within a framework of rules, obligations, and power dynamics, making emotional fulfillment both dangerous and intoxicating. Every choice carried weight, every secret carried risk, and every act of passion had consequences that extended far beyond the individual heart. Medieval love, in its forbidden forms, reminds us that the human heart has always sought connection, even in the face of danger, judgment, and social constraint. It was a world where longing, creativity, and courage collided with duty, law, and morality. A world in which love was never simple, never private, and never without cost. Love across borders and cultures. Medieval Europe was not isolated, and neither was its love. Trade, travel, diplomacy, and conquest created opportunities for romances that crossed borders, languages, and cultures. These relationships, while exciting and rich with potential, introduced layers of complication, from social suspicion to religious tension, making cross-cultural love both alluring and precarious. Crusades, pilgrimages, and military campaigns brought Europeans into contact with distant lands and peoples. Knights and merchants traveled far from home, encountering cultures with different languages, customs, and social expectations. Romance could bloom in these contexts as travelers formed bonds with locals or fellow travelers. Yet such relationships were often constrained by practical concerns, including distance, family obligations, and political repercussions. Long separations, cultural misunderstandings, and conflicting loyalties made sustaining these romances a formidable challenge. Marriage across cultures was especially complex. A nobleman might marry a foreign princess to cement alliances, bring peace, or secure trade routes. These unions were highly strategic, with love often secondary to diplomacy. Cultural differences, language, customs, religion, could create additional hurdles, requiring negotiation, compromise, and patience. Religious authorities often monitored such unions closely, ensuring adherence to church law, proper conversion when necessary, and the legitimacy of heirs. Love, when it emerged, was often a slow and negotiated affair, requiring mutual respect and adaptation. Trade and urban centers also facilitated cross-cultural romance. Ports, markets, and fairs brought together people from different regions and backgrounds. Merchants, artisans, and travelers met in bustling towns, where exchanges of goods often led to exchanges of words, glances, and affection. While social hierarchies still mattered, the fluidity of urban life allowed for more flexibility in romantic connections. Lovers could navigate a shared language of commerce, humor, and cultural adaptation, blending their differences into a common understanding. Religious differences added another layer of complication. Interfaith romances, whether between Christians and Muslims, Jews, or others, were socially sensitive and sometimes dangerous. Such relationships required discretion, negotiation, and sometimes secrecy, as public knowledge could provoke scandal, disapproval, or even violence. The stakes were high, but the emotional intensity of forbidden or culturally complicated love often made these connections memorable and transformative. Language, poetry, and art became vital tools in cross-cultural romance. Lovers used letters, gifts, and shared cultural symbols to communicate desire and build intimacy across linguistic or social barriers. Music, dance, and storytelling allowed people to transcend differences, creating emotional connection where words alone might fail. These creative solutions illustrate the ingenuity of medieval lovers navigating a complex and interconnected world. Even among peasants or lower-ranking travelers, cross-cultural love could occur, though social pressures remained strong. Mixed marriages were often pragmatic, influenced by labor needs, shared resources, or community networks. Yet affection and mutual respect could flourish, proving that love was resilient and adaptive across all social classes and cultural contexts. Literature and chronicles from the period highlight the fascination with cross-border love. Tales of knights, pilgrims, and travelers who fell in love abroad often celebrate courage, adaptability, and ingenuity. Heroes and heroines overcame linguistic, cultural, and religious obstacles to form bonds that defied expectations, reinforcing the idea that love is both universal and deeply human. Ultimately, love across borders and cultures shows the adaptability of human desire. It was complicated by social, religious, and linguistic barriers, yet it thrived through creativity, courage, and persistence. These romances remind us that medieval love was not confined to castles or villages. It extended into the wider world, reflecting both the opportunities and challenges of a connected, mobile society. Medieval cross-cultural love, therefore, was a dance of negotiation, empathy, and courage. It required sensitivity to difference, ingenuity in communication, and the willingness to take emotional and social risks. These stories illuminate the universality of desire, showing that even in a world of rigid hierarchies and cultural divisions, the human heart sought connection, understanding, and partnership beyond borders. The legacy of medieval love. Medieval love was complicated, performative, and often dangerous, but its influence on culture, literature, and social norms resonates even today. From the courts of Europe to the villages of the countryside, the customs, ideals, and rituals of medieval romance shaped perceptions of desire, honor, and partnership for centuries. Understanding its legacy helps us see how love, even under constraints, can inspire art, literature, and human imagination. One of the most enduring legacies is the literary tradition of courtly love. Stories of knights, ladies, and heroic deeds created archetypes that still appear in modern narratives: the devoted lover, the unattainable beloved, and the pursuit of honor alongside passion. These tales, from Lancelot and Guinevere to Tristan and Isolde, codified ideals of behavior, demonstrating how desire could be noble, challenging, and morally significant. They influenced poetry, song, and prose for generations, shaping both the form and content of romance literature. Courtly love also introduced the idea that love could exist independently of marriage. While marriage was largely pragmatic, rooted in alliance and economic considerations, courtly ideals celebrated emotional devotion, longing, and admiration. This distinction between duty and desire became a theme throughout Western literature and art, inspiring Renaissance writers, romantic poets, and modern storytellers who explore the tension between societal expectation and personal passion. Beyond literature, the rituals and practices of medieval love left tangible marks on social life. Festivals, dances, gift-giving, and secret messages created frameworks for courtship that persisted in various forms. Communities developed traditions that balanced public scrutiny with private desire, and the concept of love as performative expressed through action, gesture, and creativity remains central in many cultural rituals today. Weddings, engagements, and romantic celebrations often echo the emphasis on public acknowledgement, symbolic gestures, and ceremonial acts rooted in medieval practice. The emphasis on honor and virtue as integral to love also resonates through time. Medieval societies tied affection to moral conduct, courage, and social responsibility. Even when desire conflicted with duty, individuals were expected to navigate this tension with discretion and intelligence. Modern notions of integrity, loyalty, and mutual respect in relationships reflect the enduring influence of these ideals, reminding us that love is both emotional and ethical. The tension between secrecy and openness in romance also has a lasting impact. Medieval lovers relied on coded messages, hidden letters, and clandestine meetings, highlighting the creativity and ingenuity required to navigate social constraints. Today, while societal norms differ, the need for communication, subtlety, and thoughtful expression in relationships echoes the challenges of medieval courtship, showing that human hearts have always sought ways to connect, despite obstacles. Cross-cultural love in the medieval period left a mark as well. Interactions across borders, faiths, and social strata expanded notions of compatibility, negotiation, and empathy. Modern ideas of intercultural romance, long-distance relationships, and partnership across social divides draw on the human experience that flourished even in a hierarchical and restrictive medieval world. The principles of respect, patience, and adaptation continue to be relevant in navigating complex relationships today. Even the darker aspects, rivalries, forbidden desires, and the consequences of transgression offer lessons. They illustrate the stakes involved in love and the costs of human folly, ambition, and impulsivity. These stories have inspired cautionary tales, romantic tragedies, and epic dramas, reminding us that love is rarely simple and that emotional intelligence is as important as passion. Ultimately, the legacy of medieval love lies in its complexity. It combined desire, honor, creativity, and social navigation in ways that shaped culture and human experience. Love was simultaneously private and public, dangerous and inspiring, pragmatic and idealized. These contradictions reveal the universality of human longing and the ways societies structure, celebrate, and constrain that longing. Medieval love teaches us that passion is inseparable from context. Its rituals, ideals, and stories remind us that romance is a negotiation between heart and society, desire and duty, risk and reward. While times have changed, the echoes of medieval affection, heroism, and ingenuity continue to shape how we understand, celebrate, and pursue love today. In the end, medieval love was complicated, but it was also transformative, shaping individuals, communities, and culture for generations. It reminds us that the pursuit of connection is timeless, demanding courage, creativity, and a willingness to navigate the intricate dance between longing and responsibility. Medieval love was complicated, woven from desire, duty, honor, and social expectation. From secret meetings and coded messages to festivals, courtly intrigue, and cross-cultural romances, every aspect of love carried meaning, risk, and consequence. It was a world where hearts and honor were inseparable, where longing required courage, and where even forbidden desire demanded creativity and discretion. Understanding medieval romance helps us see that love is never just a private feeling. It is shaped by society, influenced by culture, and tested by circumstance. The passion, ingenuity, and resilience of lovers in the Middle Ages remind us that the pursuit of connection is timeless. So next time you think about romance, remember, love has always been complicated, and sometimes that's what makes it unforgettable.